The product that we're looking at today, the Skyzone Sky02O, was sent to me by Skyzone for this review. I did not purchase it with my own money. I've not received any other compensation in exchange for this video, and in fact, I'm probably going to end up giving these goggles away to my patrons like I do with most of the things that I review. Finally, no one other than me has had any editorial input or control over any part of this review. On with the video. There was a time when Skyzone was seen as a little bit of an also-ran, kind of nipping at the heels of the big dog Fat Shark, but not really on their level. Those days are gone. The Skyzone Sky04X is an ultra-premium analog goggle. Some reviewers have called it their best analog goggle you can get for the money today, beating out the Fat Shark HDO2 and even the Orca FPV-1. I got a review of the Skyzone Sky04X, and there's a link to it down in the video description. And after you're done watching this one, I definitely recommend you check it out to see just how far Skyzone has come. But today, we're looking at the Skyzone Sky02O, which is Skyzone's attempt to walk a really fine line. Because these goggles are the cheapest goggles you can get today with OLED screens in them. And there's no doubt that OLED screens are really amazing. But the big question that we're going to have to tackle in this video is, what corners has Skyzone cut to get the OLED screens in and get the price of the goggles down to something more reasonable? And are you willing to give up those things in order to get these goggles? Or would you rather pay a little bit more for an objectively better goggle? I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. If you watched my review of the Eachine EV300O, which is the same goggle as the Skyzone Sky04X, just the Eachine has lower resolution. In fact, they're even made in the same factory. They're literally the same goggle, just one has different screens than the other and is sold as an Eachine versus a Skyzone. If you watch that review, then you know just how far Skyzone has come in improving their goggle interface and their reception of their receiver modules. So you might at first be a little bit disappointed to see that the Skyzone Sky02O has the same shell as the older Sky02C goggles. And you might wonder, does it sort of go back and give up some of those advantages? And I'm happy to say that the answer is mostly no. The Skyzone Sky02O has the same steady view receiver that is in the Eachine EV300O and the Skyzone Sky04X. And in case you missed it, when I tested that receiver, I think it performed on par with the best receivers today, the TBS Fusion and the Immersion RC RapidFire. Skyzone still has a couple issues that they're working out where some cameras have a rolling screen issue. And this is a problem that RapidFire has had to deal with, and Fusion has had to deal with, and Skyzone is dealing with. If you're affected by that, then you can switch this goggle back into diversity mode. It still has pretty good performance, but not as good performance. But for the majority of people who are not affected by that rolling screen issue, this goggle has one of the best analog receivers you can get. The main difference between the Sky02O and a goggle like the Sky04X is the Sky04X has a module bay, so in theory you can take that out, and if you wanted to, you could put a TBS Fusion or an Immersion RC RapidFire in there. I don't know why you would, because as I said, the performance is just as good, and this receiver is integrated into the goggle interface. I guess you could argue that you might want to put a TBS Fusion in the goggle because it can interact with your Crossfire system. But the problem is this: even if you had the Sky04O, the shape of the goggles, you can't actually put a Fusion module in there without actually modifying the shell, and a RapidFire just barely fits. So it turns out that even though the more expensive goggles have a module bay, you can't actually use a module with them very easily anyway. And like I said, I wouldn't want to anyway because the performance of the stock module is really freaking good. So the loss of the receiver module on these goggles, to me, is not a great disadvantage. Speaking of antennas, Skyzone has included an actual patch antenna and an actual circular polarized omni antenna, which is really great. Most goggles in this price range, if they include antennas at all, they include cheap little dipole antennas, and you don't want to be using those. You're just going to throw them out, and then you're going to spend another 20, 30, 40 bucks maybe, depending on which antennas you get, and that's going to change your price equation a little bit. One of the things I liked most about Skyzone's newest goggles was the simplification of the interface. There's a single button and a clickable jog wheel, and that's the entirety of how you access all of the functions of the goggles. The Sky02O has Skyzone's older style button layout, but I think they've changed how the menus are accessed. I really thought the menu system on the older Skyzones was a little bit I mean, if you use the goggles on a daily basis, you'd figure out which button did what, but accessing the functions was really unintuitive. On these goggles, a short press of any of the buttons brings up the on-screen display, which contains vital information like band, channel, RSSI, and other status information. The track button here is used to bring up the main menu, and then once you're in the main menu, the band and channel buttons function as an up and down. And over on this side, the rec and mode buttons are used to go into and out of the menus. So you forget about what the buttons are labeled. It's pretty easy to remember that you're using the menu over here and you're going into and out of the menu over here, and it's all pretty intuitive. To activate the DVR, we press the rec button one time to bring up the OSD, and then again to begin recording. And you can see the time elapsed indicator in the upper left of the OSD, indicating how long our recording has gone and how much SD card space we have left. Stopping recording is done exactly the same way. Just press the rec button again. This is the channel search button, and if you've owned Skyzone goggles before, you know you can hold it down to make it scan the channels and show you which channels have transmissions on them. A reminder that you generally should not rely on the channel search function to tell you what channel to be on. Oftentimes it will pick a close channel that's not exactly right, especially if you're very close to the transmitter and it's overpowering the receiver. Searching is good for if you just need to tune in a picture, but you should always learn what the actual band and channel being used by the pilot is and manually set it. But the search button on these goggles has an additional function that's very, very important. If I press that button one time to bring up the OSD and then press it again, you'll see that it switches the goggles between rapid mix mode and diversity mode. Up in the upper right corner of the OSD, you can see div versus mix. Now this is very important because, as I mentioned, with some cameras, the rapid mix mode can have this, the screen will go dark or the screen will roll horizontally, and if you're flying and this happens, you can crash and damage your quad. If you run into a camera that is having this problem, you want to switch the goggles to diversity mode. On the underside of the goggles is the standard set of ports that you'll find on any Skyzone goggle, including AV input to let you use it with a ground station, AV output to let you use it with an external screen, a USB input here that can be used to power the goggles from a USB power bank if you prefer, an SD card slot for the DVR, and a separate earphone jack. And that is an earphone jack, not a mono earphone jack like is on some other goggles. You could use any standard set of earphones with this. The goggles also have an HDMI input, so you can plug them in to your laptop and play simulator, or you can plug them into a SharkBite ground station or any other HDMI device. But you're going to want to keep in mind that the resolution on these screens is really low. So you're not going to get the full resolution of your HD feed. We'll talk about the resolution in the screens in just a little bit. On the right side of the goggles, here's the power plug. The goggles can take 2S to 6S input, and yes, they do have a power button to turn them on and off. The goggles do not come with a battery, but they come with an XT60 to DC barrel plug adapter that you could use to power the goggles off of any of your flight packs. Just put the battery in your pocket, plug the goggles in, and you're good to go. I say that. Other reviewers said the goggles came with that plug, and other Skyzone goggles I've gotten in the past have come with that plug. Technically, I have to admit that mine did not come with that plug, but I think that was probably just an oversight. The goggles do have a head tracker output if you use a head tracker with a gimbal camera. Most FPV pilots aren't doing that, but if you fly wings, you might be doing that. And they do have adjustable IPD. Many goggles coming out today have built-in diopter adjustment. These do not. So if you have glasses prescription like me, you're going to want to get some diopter inserts, and they do take the standard Fat Shark diopter inserts. You can buy Fat Shark diopters at -2, -4, and -6, or you can get custom diopters made to your exact prescription by ordering from either RHO Lens or Optic Fisher. Both of them make good products, and I use those on any of the goggles that don't have built-in diopter adjustment. How do the goggles fit your face? Well, it's going to depend a lot on your face. And with the Skyzone Sky04X, what Skyzone did is ship them with 2 separate faceplates. This here is the sort of rounder faceplate for sort of narrower faces, and they also come with a wider faceplate for people with sort of flatter faces. And if you've bought goggles before, you know which one of those you are. I hesitate to stereotype too much in today's political climate, but what I've heard is that typically Asian people tend to have a little bit flatter faces, and Western people tend to have a little bit rounder faces. I forget which goggle it was, but the goggle came out with a flatter faceplate, and every American and European who bought it was like, this fits like crap. How could you release this goggle? And all the Asians that they tested on were like, what do you mean? It fits fine. Okay, that happened. Please don't cancel me. The Skyzone Sky02O has only one faceplate, and it is the narrower faceplate. So if you have a flatter face, it may not fit as well as you would hope. I wouldn't blame you at this point if you thought the Skyzone Sky02O was just a less expensive version of the Sky02X with a couple little cosmetic differences. But that's not true. As I hinted at the beginning of this video, Skyzone had to cut some pretty significant corners to get the price of the Sky02O down where they did, and we got to acknowledge that. And the place where the corners have been cut is in the display. OLED has deep, dark blacks, rich, saturated colors, bright, brilliant whites. It's just the best. When you go from an OLED screen to an LCD screen, like is on many goggles today, the LCD screen looks pathetic. I'm not even exaggerating. It's one of those things where if you're not willing to commit, you're going to ruin it for yourself. You don't want to go back. It looks washed out, dull, dim. You're like, is this thing all the way up? Where's all the color? OLED is that good. And that's why Skyzone worked so hard to put an OLED screen in these goggles. But OLED's freaking expensive. And the way they got the price down is it is a tiny OLED screen, and it is low resolution. Resolution of the Skyzone Sky04X, the Orca FPV1, the Fat Shark HDO2, 1280 by 960, baby. That's a lot of pixels. Resolution of the Skyzone Sky02O, 600 by 400. It's not even VGA resolution. And it's not 4.3 or 16.9 either. It's 16.10 resolution. And that means that it's actually, like, it's not stretching the image. From what I can tell, it's just slicing off the top and bottom of the image. So that's a compromise you're going to make. Now, if you're flying analog, 600 by 400, you could argue that the resolution of the analog signal itself is so poor that you're not actually giving up much. I used to consider 640 by 480 to kind of be the minimum resolution to actually let you see everything that the camera is sending. So the resolution of this goggle is not a deal breaker. Like if it was 320 by 240, like some old goggles were, I'd be like, don't even touch it. Get the heck out of there. Don't buy that. It's not a deal breaker, but it's definitely noticeably worse than the resolution of higher end goggles. And if you are looking for something to use with like Fat Shark Shark Bite, just keep looking, because it's not even going to make the most of what Fat Shark Shark Bite is delivering. By way of comparison, here's the image that you would see in the DJI goggles. If you use the DJI goggles to receive an analog feed through the AV input, this is not the high definition DJI digital FPV system. It's just an analog receiver being fed into the DJI screen. And I wanted to do this because probably The DJI LCD screen is pretty good, right? And yet, it clearly doesn't look as good as the OLED screen in the Skyzone Sky04X. It's bigger, it's higher resolution. In fact, here, let's put the Sky04X screen and the DJI screen side by side and zoom the Sky04X screen in so it's the same size as the DJI. Let's see how that comparison looks. Well, okay, anytime you take a GoPro and you point it at a screen, it's not going to show like literally what your eyeball would see, because the GoPro is not recording exactly what your eyeball would see, and then you're playing it back on YouTube or whatever, and so there's always some loss there. But hopefully I've made the point. The OLED screens in the Sky04X, and yes, also the Sky02O, are pretty freaking impressive. Hey there, Joshua from the future here. Actually, no, I don't feel like I made that point, and I'm really torn here. The OLED screen looks oversaturated. It looks really much worse, on my monitor at least, than the LCD screen. It looks warmer, it looks too reddish. I don't know what to tell you. I feel like I want to show you this comparison because I want to just let you decide for yourself and give you the data. I don't want to like manipulate the image to make it look like I think it ought to look. At the same time, there is nobody in the world who is going to argue that they would rather be looking at an LCD screen than an OLED screen. So here's the data, but I think the data is actually misleading you, and I don't know what to do about that. I got to mention another aspect of the Sky02O's lenses, and this one might only be because I have a particularly bad glasses prescription. My diopter is -625 to -675, and I use either adjustable diopters, like if the goggles have them, or I use lens inserts. When I looked through these goggles with my lens inserts in, I found it very difficult to line up the screen left to right so I could see the whole screen sharp from side to side. And I could not get these goggles to resolve. I could not get them in front of my eyes in such a way that they resolved into one single image, which says to me that they're not lining up in front of my eyes correctly. I just couldn't focus on the whole screen. But I gave these goggles to 3 other people who don't wear glasses, and I asked them to put the goggles on, close one eye, center the screen, close the other eye, center the screen, and then look through the goggles and see what they saw. And they didn't have any problem. But I use my diopter inserts with lots of other goggles, and this is the first time I've had that problem. So I feel like something about the optics of the Sky02O makes them a little more sensitive to eye positioning than some other goggles on the market. And especially if you do have a large prescription like me, -6 diopter, then I would probably steer you away from them. I would not be able to use these goggles on a day-to-day basis with my eyes and my prescription. So that brings us to the end of the video, and as always, the question, should you buy it? And the reason that we've gone over to my computer for this one is that price factors into that. And prices of goggles right now are all over the place. If you go back to my Goggle Buyer's Guide, 2021 Goggle Buyer's Guide from January of this year, just 3 or 4 months ago, the prices that I list in that video, the goggles have all gotten more expensive, which is crazy. When have goggle prices ever gone up? By the way, if you do want to check that out and see all the other goggles on the market and how they stack up against each other, I'll put a link in the video description. Everything in that video is accurate except the prices. So let's look at the prices of these goggles and see how they compare. Here's the Skyzone Sky02O, which right now is listing for $359 from the Canadian warehouse on Banggood. And we're looking at Banggood for all of these because I figure it's apples to apples pricing. We can look a couple other places and the price may vary a little bit. Compare that to the Skyzone Sky04X at $519. The Sky04X has better resolution, 1280 by 960 resolution, compared to 600 by 400 to give me a break. Huge 46-degree field of view, much larger screen. It has adjustable 4:3:16:9 aspect ratio. So if you do use widescreen, you can. Built-in diopter adjustment. Some people would see that as a negative. They would prefer to use their own lenses. That might be a deal breaker for you. Upgraded DVR. By the way, the DVR on the Sky02O, it's the old MJPEG DVR. It's not bad, but it's not as good as the H.264 DVR on the Sky04X. Go watch my review of the Eachine EV300O if you want to know all the good things about the Sky04X. The Sky04X is $160 more than the Sky02O. So you sure are paying a lot to get there, but it sure does bring a lot to the table in terms of image quality. Now we can also compare that to the Sky03O, which is available for $400 from the USA warehouse, or confusingly $480 from the China warehouse. Don't buy that. Just pay $500 for the Sky04X. I don't understand. But if you're in the USA, you could get the Sky03O for $400. And the Sky03O has 1024 by 768 resolution with an OLED screen. Pretty respectable. Worth mentioning that the 030 has the older menu system, not the upgraded menu system. So it's not going to be quite as intuitive to use. It also doesn't have the steady view receiver. So the receiver module is not going to be on par. I feel like, oh man, it's $100 difference though. Yeah, that's tough. I would probably take, would I take the Sky02O or the Sky03O? Does the vastly superior receiver on the Sky02O outweigh the reduced image resolution? That's tough. That's really tough. I'm not sure I could call that one. Now we also should compare to the Fat Shark Attitude V6, which is similar in price to the Sky02O. $359 for the Sky02O, $329 for the Attitude V6. It's actually a little bit cheaper. The Attitude V6 comes with a receiver module, but it is nowhere near the quality of the steady view module in the Skyzone. So it comes with antennas, fine. Comes with a battery kit pack, that's fine. In terms of specs, it has a 39-degree field of view, much larger than the field of view on the Sky02O. And it has 1280 by 960 resolution. So high resolution, but LCOS display, not OLED. So it's good, but it's not going to be on the level of the OLED. A lot of people would argue that the Attitude V6 is actually the sweet spot. You save a lot of money. You could use some of that money to upgrade to a RapidFire or a Fusion and get a great receiver module. And they might be right. But if you want the absolute best image quality, you're going to be going with OLED, not LCOS. Incidentally, I have a full review of the Attitude V6. I'll put a link to that down in the video description as well. The last thing we have to at least mention is that a new goggle from Skyzone is coming, the Skyzone Sky04L. And the Skyzone Sky04L has an LCOS screen similar to the Attitude V6, 1280 by 960 resolution, similar to the Attitude V6, and it has Skyzone's steady view receiver in it, so it's going to beat the receiver on the Attitude V6, has a 39-degree field of view, similar to the Attitude V6, so it's basically like an Attitude V6, but with a steady view receiver and Skyzone's interface and a few other features that the Attitude doesn't come with. That is not for sale as of now, but I will be reviewing it when it comes out, so make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. If you have the time to wait until that comes, it may be worth waiting for, as long as you're willing to accept the slightly reduced image quality of the LCOS screen. So where does that leave us with the Skyzone Sky02O? It's the cheapest way to get an OLED screen. That's a fact. It has pretty good build quality and pretty good support. That's a fact. And it has one of the best receivers on the market included in the price. That's a fact. The low resolution and small image are going to put some people off, but they're not so bad that they would make me not recommend the goggle. Like, there have been goggles out there with such small screens and such low resolution, I just said don't buy them. And the Skyzone Sky02O is just enough that I would say if you're leaning that direction and $359 is your budget, then it should be high on your list. In fact, I'm not sure what else out there. I guess it would be the Attitude V6. That's its main competitor. But you got to decide for yourself. Check out my review of the Attitude V6 and see what you think about it. Check out my goggle buyer's guide and see what you think about all the other stuff on the market at various price points. And if you do decide to get something, use the affiliate links down in the video description. When you click that link and then make any purchase at the affiliated vendor, don't have to buy this item, you can buy anything. Just click the link, do your shopping, check out, and I get a small commission. It's an easy way for you to support me, and that doesn't cost you anything. That's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Happy flying.
You guys, I don't know where I am, and I don't know what's going to happen, but if I don't make it out of this, I just want to know that you subscribe to my channel, or maybe join my Patreon, or click one of these videos I picked out for you.